My name is Rossie Hutchinson. I'm a modern quilter and artist, and I'm known for doing a lot of improvisational patchwork. And today what I'm gonna talk with you all about is going from, playing and making these improvisational blocks to putting them together into a quilt top that looks really cohesive and smooth. So if you look at the quilt behind me, you can see these blocks finish up nicely at the sides and also the bottom and the top. So I'm going to walk you through my process for achieving that. So what you'll want to do is think about what type of assembly you're going to be doing. So of course, improvisational quilting blocks can be done where you make a square block. So here's an improvisational log cabin quilt here. And of course, that just finished in squares. You just cut them the same size, put them together. That's extremely straightforward. I think we can all grasp how to do that one. The quilt behind me was made to be assembled in rows. And what that means is when I'm making my blocks, I'm making them all the same height, approximately. Because the sides might not be 100, or might not be 90-degree angles, they're just close, right? But you want to, when you're cutting, have a guideline for how tall you're cutting those blocks. The widths vary quite a bit. So I'm going to show you with these blocks how to handle that. So what you want to do is when you put your blocks together, you'll arrange them as pleases you on your design wall. And you see these are approximately the same height. They're not exact. Figure out how you want them arranged. Now what you'll want to do is figure out where the breaks are. What you're doing is you're going to fill in the middle with new blocks that you will make or pull from your pre-made stash. So find your breaks. This is going to be my widest row, so I'm going to use this as the set for how wide my quilt will be. What you want to do is go ahead and sew these all together because you're going to lose, of course, width into those seams. And when you lose width into the seams, especially with improvisational quilts, it might not be exactly a ½ inch because this isn't a 90-degree angle. So sew them together. You would sew these together, and it's going to bunch up a little bit. And then you measure this gap, and you make 1 or 2 blocks to go into this gap. So that's how you handle the rows and getting the you add on the inside. So, and you want to keep going with your different rows. Have that space where you're inserting be in different places throughout your quilt. The same logic applies with a quilt that is assembled in columns, except of course you're doing it at 90 degrees difference, right? Some people need to see this demonstrated, right? So here you are. It's the same thing. So your width of your blocks is going to be more or less uniform, and you're setting the height of your columns and inserting as needed. So that's how to do a row assembly or a column assembly. Another thing that I enjoy doing is, especially when you have a quilt where you really want to show off those blocks, is floating them in naked space, kind of, just patchwork space. So you can see here, I've got these circle into rectangles. Some of these are made with dye, some of these are made with paint, and I just wanted to show them off, and they didn't look right crammed into rows. So I wanted to just float them in some open fabric space. This is a little bit more of a puzzle. What you need to do is use a design wall and arrange them as you want them on the design wall. Don't think about how tricky it's going to be to assemble them. We'll get there. Arrange them, and then what you want to do is build out to make right angles. So this quilt is useful for demonstration because I use slightly different colored fabrics as I went. So this block needs to get built out to be the same width that it can combine with these below it. So add a little to the left, a little to the right, a little to the top, and then move on to down here. So when you're puzzling this out on your design wall, you may find it really useful to use, I use on my design wall yarn and pins to mark where the big seams are going to be. So when this was in process, I would have had, yarn marking that area, marking here. There's a great big seam right down the center of this one. Over here, there's another one here and here. So plan it out that way and just go piece by piece across your quilt, adding as you go. Now in this case, these are 90-degree angles, so I can pretty confidently, if I measure, I want to get 3 inches to this edge, add that 1/2 inch, because you're going to lose it in the seams, 3.5 inches, and there you go. So it's important to remember when you're doing improvisational quilting, don't get ahead of yourself, don't worry about how much work it is, just put in the work, just do it. It's a lot of fun, and the outcome can be really great. So looking at the quilt behind me, you'll see a couple of my favorite things about working improvisationally. So if you look at the blue block there, you'll see that above it is just a blank piece of fabric that got added in. As you scan across the quilt, you'll find more and more moments where instead of going back and cutting everything to be different, I just kept adding. I think adding, not subtracting, is key to making an improvisational quilt really sing. Those are my tips for taking your improv blocks and making them into a beautiful quilt.